Hello, I'm Faye and I'm here to talk about the 5 books that I liked the very least in 2018. All of these I gave a 1-star rating on Goodreads, which I don't do often and sometimes I find difficult justifying. I gotta be honest. So take all of this knowing that this is my personal experience. Not all of these books are books that are bad, although I would argue that some of them you should maybe just go and read something else. But I'm going to go not by chronological order, but by least to most popular on Goodreads, so that we'll get I'll groove in with the least controversial ones first. With a 3.23 rating on Goodreads, which is not a great rating on Goodreads, a lot of people agree with me that See What I Have Done by Sarah Schmidt, I had to glance to the side, was not a great book. This is the story, the historical fiction story about Lizzie Borden and the murder of her father and whether in fact she is guilty herself or, well, who committed the crime. And why didn't I like this story? I've already forgotten the ending, which is not a great sign for a crime plot, where you could argue the ending is everything that we're working towards finding out. But mainly, I really disliked that this book was overly busy with trying to set the scene. You know, I think 1892, I think I said it's set in. So everything is constantly rotting and dark and dank, and I just couldn't help think that that wouldn't be the way everyone would constantly describe their surroundings in that time. It was almost like a weird contemporary view back onto the past, which threw me out loads. All of the characters are horrible, which I don't always mind, but it was a really muddled way of telling a story, and a lot of the characters, we don't like them, but we also don't really get to understand them, which is then my one demand if I read about characters that are so horrible. So I would suggest instead reading Alias Grace by Margaret Atwood, which is another book that I read this year about a true crime story, and finding out whether or not the unreliable character suspect, female suspect, is in fact guilty or not. A much stronger book in my opinion. Next on the list with a 3.39 rating is My Dog Tulip by J.K. Ackerly. This book is actually one where I'd say don't read it, because you'd only consider reading this if you are, like me, a big lover of dogs, because this story is his own recollection story about his relationship with his beloved Alsatian bitch and his attempts to get her laid, basically. And I thought that was like on the one hand a really strange anthropomorphism of this dog, but also like a strange obsession with your pet's sexuality, which so much of that I found icky. I already didn't love talking about his descriptions of her feces, but dog owners are weird. But then he just lost me totally when he tries to pimp out his own dog. So I'd say give it a pass. With a 3.97 rating on Goodreads, Fight or Flight by Samantha Young isn't actually unpopular. This is a romance novel about Ava and Caleb, who decide to have a purely sexual relationship after they meet on a few occasions and really dislike each other. But they are oh so attracted to each other. Ava is a busty, beautiful blonde interior designer, and Caleb is a brooding, Scottish, handsome business guy, and they both have so many judgy opinions about the other, but at the same time apparently just can't leave their hands off each other. Inevitably, they develop feelings for each other. But the main character of Caleb is just the worst. And maybe this is just a trope that I dislike in romance novels, this strong macho guy with a past, and apparently I'm supposed to find that sexy and not obnoxious and demeaning and sexist. But that didn't work for me. There are a few story plot lines thrown in there that I thought could have been interesting, but it was all just dominated by the fact that I hated the male love interest, and I didn't understand why you would start liking this person. He doesn't redeem himself, in my opinion. He does some horrible things. There's some judginess outside of the relationship between the two, which I also think is horrible, pertaining to the past of those two characters. Also, he keeps on saying babe, which, who says babe to someone you don't actually like? Ugh, bleh. I really didn't like this. I think there are romance novels that have the trope of the macho guy without him actually being such an ass. So don't read it. Also, someone isn't just like smoldering hot because he has a Scottish accent. I thought that was just gimmicky. I'm gonna move on now. Didn't like it. Next, with a 3.98, so barely topping that, is Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. And this and the next one are books that I feel really uncomfortable about rating so lowly. This one, because it is such a classic. It's about this captain, I forgot his name, some captain in the American army stationed in the Mediterranean during World War II, and it's about him. And for good reason, I actually don't remember his name, because it's about him and something like 50 other characters. In the whole book, there's one scene that still resonates with me that I found incredibly powerful, but it's embedded within loads of sort of slapsticky, comedic gibberish, which I didn't get. It's the only book in years that I skimmed pages. I skipped parts because we were talking about it in my book club. I ended up reading a few summaries for a few chapters online so I could skip them without feeling bad. I didn't enjoy anything about it. I didn't enjoy the story, the characters, the writing, the conclusion, nothing. I would be interesting to hear from people who thought it was great, actually viewed from this time, like not just it was great at the time and a commentary and comedic like satire of the Second World War. Maybe I just didn't get it. And then finally, with a rating of 4.21 stars, so greatly popular, is Hunger by Roxane Gay. I did look at some of the ratings that people gave it, and I'm starting to think that maybe this book wasn't for me because of my taste and certain things I look for in books. So Hunger, as the name suggests, is her relationship with food and gaining weight as a, well, protective act towards all the horrible stuff that has happened to her. It talks about her eating disorder, it talks about rape, it talks about difficult family dynamics. All of these topics I don't want to devalue, and I also don't want to criticize how the author handled them. Not really, because that is her own experience. The reason why I just didn't gel with this story is because I found it repetitive. So the actual setup of the book with very short chapters, and I felt like writing the same fact in again and again. That's something I didn't enjoy just as an act of reading. And I also found it, oh, I'm so like scared to admit this. I found it self-centered, which I realize in a memoir is not unusual and almost expected. But I wanted a bit more distance from the author herself. This way it almost sounded a bit like I was reading a diary entry adapted for the public, which was strange. And I started getting annoyed with her which is horrible because she is bearing it all. She's opening herself up, and I guess she is opening herself up to criticism as well. I think this sort of raw, honest emotionality is probably what loads of people liked about this book. I found it hopeless, and I wanted a little bit more abstraction, and I wanted maybe a bit more of a hopeful view onto the future, because I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. So those were the 5 books I rated 1 star. Don't hate me. I wish I would have liked some of these books much more. All except for My Dog Tulip. That was just weird. Like, I'm not sad I spent time reading that. That was some weird stuff. So we'll see if I can avoid 1-star reads next year, but they are always interesting and they have their place. I don't regret having read any of these books. Let me know what you think. I'm sorry if you really loved some of these books, but me not liking them doesn't mean that you have to like them any less. Maybe you can like them for the both of us. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.